Captain Daniel Harris stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Horizon Runner and watched the stars through the main window. His crew had been exploring this area of space for almost 4 months now, and they were far from home. The mission was supposed to be simple, but nothing had been simple for the last 2 days. Lieutenant Amy Brooks worked at her station, and her fingers moved quickly across the controls. She looked worried, and Daniel could see why. They had picked up a strange signal, and it was clearly not natural. Someone or something was sending them a message, and that someone knew exactly where they were. Daniel walked over to her station and looked at the screen. The signal was complex and full of patterns that showed intelligence. More than that, it was aimed directly at their ship. Amy worked with the computer to decode the message, and the minutes felt like hours. Commander Peter Cole joined them, and he had seen more of space than most humans alive. He had worked on the outer colonies for years, and he knew when something felt wrong. This felt very wrong. Amy suddenly stopped, and her face went pale. She turned to Daniel and told him he needed to read this right away. Daniel leaned over and read the decoded message on her screen. It was written in perfect English, as if whoever sent it had studied their language for years. The message said that humanity had been watched and observed. It said the Galactic Council had made a decision about their species. It said humans would be contacted soon, and they needed to prepare for integration under supervision. It said resistance was not needed and compliance would keep them safe. The bridge went quiet except for the soft sounds of the ship systems. Every crew member understood what this moment meant. Humanity had been reaching into space for decades now and building colonies and searching for other intelligent life. They had found ruins from ancient civilizations, but never anything alive and never anything current. This was first contact, but it did not feel like the friendly meeting they had always hoped for. Daniel stood up straight, and his mind was already working through what to do next. He told Amy to send this message to Earth immediately with top priority. He told Peter to get him a full analysis of their position and to check if there were any ships nearby that they could not see. The crew moved quickly to follow his orders. Lieutenant Chris Murphy called out from the tactical station that he was picking up something on the long-range sensors. Multiple contacts, and they were big ships with designs he had never seen before. They were just sitting there at the edge of the star system waiting. Daniel asked how many ships there were, and Chris said at least 20, but possibly more behind them. Daniel felt a cold weight in his stomach. This was not a friendly visit, and this was not first contact as humanity had imagined it. This was a show of force, and someone wanted humanity to understand their place before any real talking began. Daniel ordered the crew to hold position and take defensive stance only. He did not want to give these aliens any reason to attack. He also told someone to contact Admiral Lisa Grant at Central Command because she needed to know what they were dealing with right away. The crew worked around him, and Daniel stared at the screen at the distant stars that had always meant hope and possibility for humanity. People had dreamed of finding others in space and of joining a bigger galactic community, but not like this and never like this. Amy called out that they had another incoming transmission from the same source. But this time it was a direct call to their ship. They wanted to speak with Daniel right now. Daniel took a deep breath because this was the moment humanity had prepared for and hoped for and feared. But it was happening on someone else's terms and under the shadow of threats and overwhelming force. He told Amy to put it through to the main screen. The screen changed, and for the first time humanity looked at a member of the Galactic Council. The being was tall and thin with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to absorb light. Its face was somewhat like a human face, but different enough to make Daniel feel uneasy. Behind this creature he could see what looked like a huge chamber, with other aliens moving around. The being spoke, and Daniel was surprised to hear perfect English that matched with the movements of its mouth. They had translation technology far better than anything humans had made. The alien said its name was Counselor Vren of the Galactic Council. It said that Daniel was Captain Daniel Harris of the human ship Horizon Runner. It was not asking a question because they already knew exactly who he was. Daniel said yes, that was him, and that he welcomed this contact on behalf of humanity, but he was concerned about the message they had received. Vren did not change expression, and something that might have been amusement or contempt showed in those dark eyes. It said that Daniel's concern was noted, but it did not matter. The Council had been watching humanity for 50 years now. They had observed human expansion into nearby star systems, and human technology development in human society. Peter spoke up from beside Daniel and asked if they had been spying on Earth. Vren replied smoothly that they observed all emerging species and that it was the Council's job to make sure the galaxy stayed stable. It said humanity had reached a critical point now. Humans had faster than light travel and had built multiple colonies and had started making weapons of serious destructive power. Species like this had to be brought into the Council's framework before they became a threat to themselves or to others. Daniel felt anger rising, but he pushed it down and asked what exactly this integration meant. Vren moved one hand and the screen split to show what looked like a contract or agreement document. The alien explained that the terms were simple and straightforward. Humanity would accept Council oversight of all military development. Human expansion would be limited to approved areas only. Human government would work with Council administrators who would be stationed in major cities. Advanced technologies that were deemed dangerous would be restricted and controlled. In return, humanity would get Council protection and access to trade networks and guidance in developing safely. The bridge was completely silent now. Every human there understood what they were hearing. This was not integration and this was not cooperation. This was conquest dressed up in nice diplomatic words. This was surrender. Daniel looked at the alien on the screen and asked quietly what would happen if humanity refused the terms. For the first time, Vren's expression changed into something that might have been a smile, but it held no warmth at all. The counselor said that refusal would be unfortunate, and that the Council had dealt with 347 species over the past 1,000 years. Only twice had a species chosen to refuse their guidance, and both times the results were very bad. Vren explained that the Council did not make war, but they made sure species complied through economic isolation and technology restriction. A species that could not trade and could not advance, and could not expand beyond its current territory usually, reconsidered its position within a few generations. Amy whispered from her station that they meant starvation and stagnation. Vren somehow heard her and said they called it protective quarantine, but yes, it was essentially that. Humanity would be stuck in their current systems until they developed the wisdom to accept guidance. Daniel's hands gripped the armrests of his chair hard. Around him, he could see his crew's faces showing the same anger and helplessness he felt. This alien and this Council were offering them a choice between controlled slavery or isolated imprisonment. Daniel said he needed to talk with his government first because this was not a decision one ship captain could make alone. Vren said, of course, and that they had 72 hours to give their first response. The Council fleet would stay at the edge of the system and wait. Vren strongly advised Daniel to talk widely with human leadership. The alien said resistance had never helped any species, and then those dark eyes seemed to look right into Daniel's soul. Vren said they had watched human history and seen the wars and conflicts and the tendency toward violence when threatened. The Council was not humanity's enemy, and they were offering salvation from themselves. The transmission ended suddenly and left the bridge in shocked silence. Peter finally spoke and said 72 hours meant 3 days to give up freedom or face isolation. Daniel stood and started pacing the bridge. His mind was working through scenarios, and none of them were good. He told Amy to set up an encrypted channel to Earth and use every secure method they had. He wanted this information in front of the Security Council within 1 hour. He told Chris to do a detailed analysis of that fleet and find out their capabilities and formations and any weaknesses. Chris started to say something about not fighting them, but Daniel cut him off and said he was considering everything, and that knowledge was never wasted. Over the next hours, the Horizon Runner became very busy. Messages flew back and forth between the ship and Earth. Daniel had encrypted talks with Admiral Lisa Grant, and emergency sessions of the United Earth Security Council were broadcast to the ship through secure channels. Daniel watched from his ready room as the leaders of humanity struggled with the impossible choice. Some people said to accept the terms and argued that survival was more important than pride. Others demanded defiance and insisted that humanity had not fought from caves to the stars just to bow before alien masters. The debate was fierce and passionate and deeply divided. Peter came into the ready room with his tablet showing a news feed. He told Daniel he should see this because someone had leaked the transmission, and it was all over Earth's networks now. Daniel watched as footage of Counselor Vren played across billions of screens. The reaction was instant and explosive. Protests started in major cities and military bases went on high alert. Civilian ships began leaving the outer colonies while others loaded weapons and headed toward the fleet's position. Peter said it was chaos down on Earth and that half the people wanted to surrender while half wanted to fight. Nobody knew what the right answer was. Daniel replied that there was no right answer and just choices that were all bad. But he said they had one advantage the council was not counting on. Peter asked what that was. Daniel looked out the window at the distant stars and at the council fleet waiting beyond. He said the aliens had studied human history and seen the wars and violence. They thought they knew humans now. He turned back to Peter, and there was something hard in his eyes that had been shaped by humanity's bloody past. He said the council learned the wrong lessons from history. They saw humanity's capacity for war and thought it made humans weak and in need of guidance. They did not understand that it made humans survivors, and survivors did not go quietly into cages. Peter asked what Daniel meant, and Daniel told him to get the crew together because it was time to start planning humanity's response. He said the council was not going to like what came next. On Earth, the emergency meeting of the United Earth Security Council happened 36 hours after Vren's ultimatum. Representatives from every major nation and colony gathered in the big hall under the Geneva complex, while billions watched through secure broadcasts. Admiral Lisa Grant stood at the speaker's platform with her silver hair and decorated uniform that showed decades of service. Lisa began by saying they had looked at every option available. Their scientists had analyzed the council fleet, and their diplomats had researched similar situations in human history, and their military planners had run thousands of battle simulations. She paused to let the seriousness of the moment settle over everyone. The conclusion was clear, she said. If humanity fought the council fleet directly, they would lose because the alien technology was centuries ahead. If humanity accepted the council's terms, they would survive, but as subjects and not as equals. A murmur went through the assembly hall. President Richard Blake of the American Federation leaned forward and asked what the admiral was proposing then. Lisa's expression became hard in a way that made even the diplomats sit up straight. She said she was proposing that humanity do what it had always done when facing impossible odds. They would change the game completely. She turned on the holographic display and it showed star charts and ship movements. The council had made assumptions about humanity based on watching from a distance. They believed they understood human capabilities and psychology and limitations, but there was one thing they could not see from far away, and one thing that had been kept secret at the highest levels for 15 years. The display changed to show footage from a remote research place in the Kuiper Belt. Sleek ships that looked different from anything in the regular Earth fleet moved through space. Their hulls absorbed light and their designs were made for purposes beyond just exploration. Lisa said these were the Shadow Fleet, and that there were 73 vessels designed and built in complete secrecy after humans found the first proof of alien ruins on a distant planet. These were ships that did not appear in any public records and were crewed by volunteers who officially did not exist. These ships had been built for situations exactly like this one. The council chamber erupted in shocked conversation because many of the representatives had not known about the Shadow Fleet. It was a secret kept by the military and the highest levels of government. It was a backup plan for the day humanity met hostile intelligence among the stars. President Chen Lin of the Pacific Alliance spoke up, and her voice cut through the noise. She said Lisa was talking about war with a civilization that had dominated the galaxy for 1,000 years. Lisa countered that she was talking about survival. The council's mistake was giving humanity an ultimatum. They told humans exactly where their fleet was and exactly how long they had, and they were sitting there confidently waiting for surrender. The council did not know about the hidden ships, and they did not know about weapons humans had developed that even their own people did not know existed. Most importantly, they did not understand one basic truth about humanity. Lisa looked around the chamber and met the eyes of leaders and representatives from across human space. She said that humans did not submit, not to kings and not to empires and not to councils of alien masters who thought they could control humanity's future. Human history was a story of resisting control. Humans had broken kings and destroyed empires and freed themselves from every chain ever placed on them. Why would they stop now, she asked. The chamber went silent. Then slowly President Blake stood up and asked what the admiral needed from them. Lisa said she needed everything. She needed the Shadow Fleet activated immediately, and every ship in the regular fleet upgraded with their latest weapons. She needed the space defense platforms turned on, and the civilian population prepared for possible attack. She needed the support of this council to do what had to be done. One by one, the representatives stood in a visual vote of confidence. Not everyone agreed, and there were people calling for caution and asking for diplomatic solutions. But the majority understood what was happening here. On the Horizon Runner, Daniel watched the broadcast with his senior officers. When Lisa finished speaking, he turned to his crew and said they heard the Admiral. Humanity was not surrendering and not giving in, and definitely not going quietly. This ship was now part of the response plan. Amy asked what their role would be. Daniel said they were the eyes and ears. They would stay here watching the Council fleet and gathering every bit of information they could. They were also going to be the first line of communication. If this went wrong, they needed to be ready to change plans quickly. Chris spoke up from Tactical and said that even with the Shadow Fleet, the numbers did not look good. The Council had at least 20 capital ships out there, plus many support vessels. The entire human military, including the secret fleet, was maybe 300 ships total. Peter said with a dark smile that this was why they were not fighting fair. Human tactics had never been about equal fights. They were about using every advantage and every trick and every desperate move humans could think of. 24 hours before the ultimatum expired, the Council fleet detected unusual activity in the human system. Ships were moving and orbital platforms were powering up, and energy readings were appearing throughout human space that had not been there before. Counselor Vren watched the reports with growing worry. The humans were supposed to be frozen by fear and torn between groups arguing for surrender or useless resistance. Instead, they were organizing with remarkable speed and working together. Vren commanded an analysis of what was happening. A younger counselor pulled up tactical information and said the humans were gathering forces near their home world in a standard defensive position. Nothing the Council could not overcome. But Vren was not convinced. Something about the human response felt wrong. They were not panicking and not scrambling around confused. They were moving with purpose and planning. Vren asked what they were missing. The junior counselor asked if they should give humans more time to see reason. Vren said no, but told them to increase watching. He wanted to know every ship movement and every communication. These humans were planning something, he could feel it. On the horizon. Runner Daniel got an encrypted message directly from Admiral Grant. It was very short, with just 3 words that made him smile despite the tension. The message said to set the trap. Humanity's response was about to begin, and the Galactic Council had no idea what they were going to face. The 72 hours ended at exactly 8 in the morning Earth Standard Time. Across human space, billions of people held their breath and watched their screens waiting to see what their leaders had decided. The Galactic Council fleet had moved closer during the night, and their huge ships were now clearly visible in Earth's telescopes. They hung like strange moons against the darkness of space. On the bridge of the Horizon Runner, Daniel stood beside Amy at communications. He told her to open a channel to the Council main ship, because it was time to give them humanity's answer. The screen changed to show Counselor Vren's blank face. Behind him, other Council members had gathered, representing species humanity had never seen before. All of them wore the same look of patient superiority, as if watching children finally learn an obvious lesson. Vren said that Daniel's time had ended and asked what humanity's decision was. Daniel straightened his uniform and met the counselor's dark eyes. He said humanity's decision was no. A ripple of movement went through the council members. Vren tilted his head slightly in maybe the alien version of confusion. He told Daniel to clarify and asked if humans rejected the terms of peaceful integration. Daniel said they rejected the Council's authority to offer such terms in the first place. Humanity recognized that the Galactic Council existed. Humans were even willing to have diplomatic relations and trade agreements. But humanity would not accept oversight or restrictions or administrators. Humans were independent and would stay independent. Vren's expression became hard. He said then humans chose quarantine and economic isolation and technology restriction. Daniel would condemn his species to never advancing just for the sake of pride. Daniel shot back that humans chose freedom and were prepared to defend that choice. For the first time, something like uncertainty crossed Vren's features. He said humans could not seriously be thinking about military resistance. They had seen the Council fleet. The entire human military could not stand against even a small part of their forces. Daniel smiled, and it was not a nice smile. He said Vren was probably right that in a straight fight humans would lose. But that was the thing about humans. They did not believe in straight fights. He nodded to Amy, who cut the transmission and immediately opened encrypted channels across human space. Daniel gave the order to all units to execute the plan called Defiance. What happened next would be studied by military experts for generations to come. The Galactic Council had positioned their fleet in a standard blockade formation surrounding the human home system at key points that should have stopped any escape or effective resistance. It was a formation that had worked perfectly against dozens of other species over the centuries. But humanity had spent the past 72 hours studying that formation and finding its weaknesses, and preparing a response the Council could never have expected. The first part of the plan began with the civilian fleet. Thousands of cargo ships and colony vessels and private craft that had been supposedly running away suddenly changed direction. They did not attack the Council ships, but instead they spread throughout the system. Each one was broadcasting on every frequency and filling space with electromagnetic noise. Communications between Council vessels became hard and then nearly impossible as the humans jammed everything. One of Vren's officers asked what the humans were doing. Vren replied that these were basic tactics and that jamming would not save them, but he sounded less certain than before. The second part proved him wrong. As the Council fleet tried to regroup and clear the communications problem, they did not notice the small human ships that had been hiding behind asteroids and disabled satellites. These were not warships, but mining vessels with improvised weapons attached. They had nuclear devices and kinetic rams and fuel cores set to explode. The first Council ship to get hit was a smaller vessel on the outer edge of the formation. A mining ship accelerated to ramming speed while its crew escaped in a shuttle at the last moment. The impact and nuclear explosion did not destroy the more advanced alien ship, but it damaged it badly and sent it spinning out of formation. Then it happened again and again. Across the system, mining ships and modified civilian craft threw themselves at the Council fleet in organized suicide runs. The Council's better shields and armor meant most attacks only caused small damage, but the sheer boldness of it was something they had never seen. The willingness of humans to sacrifice valuable ships and resources shocked them. Vren shouted that this was madness, and that humans were throwing away their vessels for nothing. But Admiral Lisa Grant, watching from the command center deep under Geneva, knew it was not for nothing. Every damaged Council ship and every moment of confusion and every adjustment they made to their formation was exactly what she needed. She calmly ordered the third part of the plan and told them to launch the Shadow fleet from hiding places throughout the outer system and from behind moons and inside clouds of space dust where human ships had been silently waiting. The Shadow fleet came out. These ships were different from anything the Council had seen in their watching. They were smaller and faster and covered in stealth technology taken from alien ruins and improved by human creativity. The Shadow fleet did not fight the Council directly. Instead, they darted in and out of the chaos created by the civilian ships. They targeted communication systems and sensor arrays and engines. The humans could not match the Council's raw power, so they focused on blinding them and slowing them and breaking their ability to work together. On the horizon, Runner Chris tracked the battle with growing excitement. He said the plan was working and the Council ships were breaking formation. They could not work together without their sensors and communications. Peter muttered that now the Council knew what it felt like to be outmatched and that it was not fun. But Daniel kept his eyes on the tactical display, watching for the next move. The Council would adapt because they had to have ways to counter these tactics. This was just the first round of what could be a very long fight. He was right. After the first shock, the Council fleet began to respond with terrible efficiency. Their weapons were far more advanced than anything humanity had, and they began destroying the civilian ships, creating the jamming field in a systematic way. The Shadow fleet's stealth technology proved less useful as the Council changed their sensors to detect them better. And then the Council showed why they had ruled the galaxy for so long. From their capital ships, they launched swarms of automated drones. Thousands of small craft hunted down the Shadow fleet ships with endless determination. Amy reported with tension in her voice that they were losing ships, and the Shadow fleet was taking heavy losses. Daniel's fist clenched tight. They had hurt the Council and proven that humanity would not give in easily. But it was not enough. Unless they had something more and something the Council could not counter, this would end in defeat. As if reading his thoughts, a priority message arrived from Admiral Grant. Daniel went to his ready room to take it privately. Lisa's face appeared on the screen and she looked tired but determined. She said it was time for the final part, and that something called Project Hephaestus was ready. Daniel felt his breath catch. Project Hephaestus was the last secret, and one that even most of the Security Council did not know about. He asked if she was sure because once they used it there was no going back. Lisa said there was never any going back anyway. They had to play this card or they would lose. Daniel's ship had the targeting information, and they were the closest. It had to be them. Daniel nodded slowly and said he understood and that they would not let her down. He returned to the bridge and his crew could see immediately that something had changed. He ordered them to set course for specific coordinates he transmitted to the pilot, maximum speed. He told Peter to prepare the ship for combat. He told Amy to get ready to send a message to the Council main ship. And he told Chris to warm up the weapons they had been keeping hidden. Chris asked with confusion what weapons Daniel meant. Daniel settled into his command chair with a serious expression. He said the ones that were going to change everything. He told the pilot to go. The Horizon Runner shot forward into the battle carrying humanity's last desperate plan. In the chaos of war, no one in the Council fleet noticed the single human ship moving fast toward a seemingly empty area of space. They were about to learn that the biggest threats often came from the places you were not watching. The coordinates Admiral Grant had given led to an area that looked completely empty. Nothing but void between distant stars. But as the Horizon Runner got closer, Chris's sensors began picking up something impossible. He said he was reading massive power levels and multiple contacts, but they were not showing up visually. They were hidden, he said. Something was out there and it was very big. Daniel ordered it on screen at maximum zoom. The screen shimmered and slowly, like ghosts appearing from fog, 3 massive structures became partly visible. They were cylinder-shaped and each one was easily 10 kilometers long. They were covered with weapon arrays and power systems that made even the Council's capital ships look simple. Amy whispered, asking what those were. Peter said they were Project Hephaestus and humanity's insurance policy. The weapons platforms had been built over the past 10 years in complete secrecy. They were constructed in deep space from materials mined in the outer system. Each one was basically a mobile fortress powered by fusion reactors that pushed the limits of human engineering. They were armed with weapons that had only existed in theory until necessity demanded they be built. Daniel opened a command channel and entered the authorization codes Grant had given him. He identified himself and requested weapons release authority. A different voice answered that Daniel did not know. It said authorization was confirmed and the Hephaestus platforms were now under his command. Fire control was moving to his tactical station. Chris's console lit up with new options and weapon systems he had never seen before. He said the energy readings were incredible, and if these fired at full power, the discharge alone could be seen from other star systems. Daniel said then they should make sure everyone saw this. Daniel opened a wide broadcast channel that went to both the Council fleet and every human ship in the system. He said this was Captain Harris to all vessels and told them to pull back to safe distance. The Hephaestus platforms were going active now. On the Council main ship, Counselor Vren received the message with confusion and growing alarm. He asked what the human was talking about because there was nothing in that area. His tactical officer reported they were detecting massive power buildups and unknown energy signatures and locations they had assessed as empty space. Vren watched his displays as 3 enormous structures appeared with their hiding fields dropping away. He asked how they missed those and how long they had been there. But there was no time for answers. The Hephaestus platforms rotated and their weapon arrays targeted the Council fleet's capital ships. And then they fired. The beams that shot out were unlike anything the Council had seen before. They were not lasers or particle weapons, but something far stranger. They were focusing beams of artificially compressed gravitational force that could tear through shields and armor like paper. The first shot struck 3 Council capital ships at the same time. It punched through their defenses and crippled their engines in seconds. The Council fleet, which had been methodically destroying human forces, suddenly found themselves taking overwhelming fire. Ships that had seemed invincible began taking critical damage. Automated drones exploded in clouds of debris as the Hephaestus platform switched to wide-area fire. Vren shouted that this was impossible. Their technology level and their observations said none of this should exist. His tactical officer reported they were taking heavy losses, and those weapons were destroying their fleet. They needed to pull back, but Vren's pride would not let him. The Council had never retreated from a mission to bring a species under control. He said no and ordered all fire concentrated on those platforms to destroy them. The remaining Council ships, battered but still strong, turned their weapons on the Hephaestus platforms. The battle that followed lit up the system like a second sun. Massive energy discharges created light effects that would be visible from Earth's surface. On the Horizon Runner, Daniel directed the defense, working with what was left of the Shadow Fleet to protect the platforms while they did their devastating work. The fighting was intense, with ships on both sides being destroyed, but the momentum had shifted toward humanity. Admiral Grant watched from Earth, and her command center tracked every exchange of fire. She said quietly that the Council was going to retreat because they had to. Humanity had proven they could hurt them badly. She was right. After losing half their capital ships and dozens of support vessels, the Council fleet began pulling back. Vren's face appeared on communication channels, and his earlier calm was completely gone. He said that Captain Harris had made his point and the Council would withdraw for now. Daniel challenged him and said for now was not good enough. The Council would withdraw permanently. They would take their fleet and leave human space completely. They would tell their Council that humanity was off limits. Humans were not subjects to be controlled. They were not children to be watched over. Humans were independent, and they had just proven they could defend that independence. Vren's expression became hard. He said humans had won this fight, but they had no idea what they had done. The Council kept order in this galaxy. Species that worked outside that order became threats and targets. Daniel might have defeated one fleet, but the Council had hundreds more. Daniel replied coldly to send them then, and humanity would defeat those too. Because here was what the Council failed to understand about humanity. Humans did not just survive, but they adapted. They created new things. They took every challenge and turned it into a chance to become stronger. Vren had watched humans for 50 years and thought he knew them. But he only saw their past. He did not see their potential. Daniel leaned forward in his command chair, and his voice carried the weight of his entire species' defiance. He told Vren to go back to the Council and tell them that humanity met their ultimatum with resistance. Tell them humans built weapons they could not detect. Tell them humans fought with tactics they could not predict. And tell them that if they came back, humanity would be even more ready next time, because that was what humans did. They prepared and improved and never stopped pushing forward. The transmission ended. The Council fleet, broken and humiliated, began its retreat. It would take them 3 days to fully leave human space, and during those 3 days they kept absolute silence, ignoring all human attempts at communication. As the last Council ship entered faster than light travel and disappeared, a cheer erupted across human space. On Earth and in the colonies and on ships and stations throughout the system, people celebrated their unexpected victory. They had faced the galaxy's controlling power and forced them to leave. But in the command center in Geneva, Admiral Grant stayed careful. She told her staff that they won the battle, but the war for humanity's independence was just beginning. The Council would not forget this, and humans needed to be ready. On the Horizon Runner, Daniel gathered his crew. They were exhausted and shaken by the fighting they had seen, but also proud. They had been the ones to deliver the final blow and to prove that humanity would not bow. Amy asked what happened now. Daniel looked out at the stars and at the vast galaxy that no longer seemed quite so welcoming. He said now they built and prepared. They would explore and expand, but with their eyes open. The Council learned today that humans could not be controlled. But humanity learned something too. They were not alone in the galaxy, and not all their neighbors would be friendly. He turned back to his crew and saw in their faces the same determination that had carried humanity from caves to the stars. But they had been facing impossible odds since the day they first looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. This was just the latest challenge. And like all the others, they would meet it on their own terms as free people and masters of their own fate. Peter raised an imaginary glass and said to humanity then, "Stubborn and contrary and impossible to control." They all echoed the words and said to humanity, the Council had planned to control humanity and to guide them and to limit them. But they had made one critical error. They assumed that better technology and overwhelming force would be enough. They had not counted on human creativity and determination and the basic inability of humanity to accept change, no matter who was trying to place them. In the days and months that followed, humanity would learn more about the Galactic Council and about the species that were part of it and about the Complicated politics of the wider galaxy. Diplomatic relations would eventually be set up, and trade agreements negotiated and alliances formed. But it would all be done on humanity's terms. The Council had wanted to control them through force. Instead, humanity had taken control of their own fate through courage and innovation, and the firm belief that freedom was worth any price. The galaxy would have to learn to deal with humanity as equals, or not at all. And as the Horizon Runner set course for new stars and new worlds and new challenges, one thing was certain. The story of humanity among the stars had only just begun, and it would be written by humans alone. The Council had tried to control humanity, but humanity had stepped in and in doing so had announced to the galaxy that Earth's children would bow to no one. They had proven that when pushed, humans pushed back harder. They had shown that technology alone did not win wars but spirit and will, and the refusal to surrender did. Daniel stood on the bridge as they jumped to faster than light speed, heading toward unknown space. Behind them, Earth was safe and free. Ahead of them was a galaxy full of wonders and dangers and species that would now have to reckon with humanity as equals. The Council had made their plans, but humans had intervened in those plans with fire and steel and unbreakable resolve. That was the human way, and it always would be.